Next one would be God definitely notices the blameless. Okay, so God is watching us. And what does he love? You see with Job? Oh, blameless, upright, avoiding evil. It makes a difference to him, right? Christ was the ultimate perfect person that lived. There's a passage in 2 Chronicles 16:9, for the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, sounds very much like Job, right? To give strong support to those whose heart is blameless before him. And then maybe one more, Ezekiel 22:30, and I sought for a man among them who should build up the wall and stand in the breach before me for the land, that I should not destroy it. But I found none. So God notices the blameless. God-pleasing faith is not when you turn to God in a crisis, but when you worship God, even though all motivation has been removed. I mentioned that already. I want to say it again. This is one of the biggest takeaways you can take home, and that is God values your worship more. I don't mean that. Maybe that's not fair, but I'll say my own understanding. Okay, God values your worship is more valuable to him when the motivation to worship has been removed. So it's like, I'm only doing this because I want to do it. I'm not doing it because anybody's encouraging me to do it. It's like if somebody's playing the guitar and everything has just perfectly happened in your life and you're praying, it's easy to say, Lord, thank you, and just feel this warmth, And if you're freezing, if you're sick, if you're hungry and cold and everything has been removed and there's no guitar, it's a bit harder to say that same prayer. Job describes his pain, and I'll just mention what we'll look at that's still coming. Sleepless nights, worms and scabs, broken skin and festering. Festering is when it just gets all yucky. Anguish of spirit, bitterness of soul, nightmares and terror in visions. Then he says, this is worse than being strangled. So it's like I'm being choked constantly. Unable to swallow. So those are just a few, it was not light what Job was going through, and we'll look at it in more detail. So now something that I had not known until a few weeks ago, and I was like awestruck when I read this, actually from this author, Robert Alter, his introduction to the book of Job, and it was so good, I just wanted to pick a few pieces out for you. Robert Alter is a Jew who did a translation of the Hebrew Bible into English. Okay, that's normal. Every English Bible we have is a translation from Hebrew. But what makes this one different is he's not trying to sound good in English. He's trying to show you what it sounds like in Hebrew. And so if there's rhythm and whatever, he tries to get as much of it across. He says it's impossible. The Hebrew is so much richer than English, but he says, I can attempt it, to give you a small thing. Okay. He calls Job, and he's not the only one, the most mysterious book in the Bible. We don't know. Where did Job get his knowledge? We don't know who wrote the book of Job. There are just so many unknowns. We don't know when it was written. We can guess when it's written, but we don't know. It resembles no other text in the whole Old Testament canon. There's no book that compares to Job. We already said, most likely it's the oldest book in the Bible. But now what he's going to tell you is it's not only the oldest book in the Bible, it's the finest piece of literature in the world. And many people will confirm that for you, okay? So imagine what we're studying, the finest piece of literature anywhere in the world. why did I say that? It's 42 chapters. The first two that we read is narrative, just like a story. But everything after that is poetry. The entire book is poetry. Yeah? And it's not roses are red, violets are blue poetry. It's incredible poetry. It's astounding. This is from Robert. It's astounding poetry eclipses, means greater than, eclipses all other biblical poetry. The poetic style is distinct both lexically and imagistically from its biblical counterparts. Job has always been regarded as part of the canon of sacred texts. This is, to me, one of the things that is very fascinating in the book of Job is you can find pieces of Job all throughout the Old Testament. So it's like it was already known when the rest of the prophets were writing their books, and they would quote from Job. Without telling you they were quoting from Job, but it's like, yeah, that's from Job. Yeah. We know nothing about the author of Job. The Hebrew poetry is rich in rhythmic effects, virtuosic wordplay, and sound play. There are no Israelite characters in the text. No Israelites, like no Jews. Yeah? Though all the speakers believe in one God. No reference to covenants. No reference to the nation of Israel. No reference to the Exodus, which was like, if you look in the Psalms and you ask yourself the question, how often is the Exodus event mentioned in the Psalms? You can find it everywhere. But it's not mentioned in this book. The book of Job investigates I don't even know how to pronounce this, theodicy? Theodicy? I don't know. It's the study of the problem of evil in the context of the existence of a good, omnipotent, and omniscient God. It's exactly the tension we've been talking about, right? There is no confident agreement among scholars on the date of the book. The speech of Elihu, so the three friends are going to take up, the three friends and Job talking to each other are going to take up most of the book. In the very end, Elihu speaks. The speech of Elihu is, he says, bombastic and repetitious. His style is vastly inferior to the rest of the book. That's what makes it cool. Elihu is a young man. The others are old men. So the old man's poetry is of high quality. The young man's poetry is horrible as far as poeticness, right? The three friends, get this. This was just, I read this and I thought, oh, wow. The three friends are very skillful in poetry and speaking. He actually mentions, he goes, they're better than the Psalms, okay? So the quality of the literature is better than the Psalms, the three friends. Yet Job's poetic abilities are above the three. No other biblical poet exhibits the virtuosity and the command of rich synonymity, which is displayed by Job. Job has an extraordinary breadth of vocabulary. The Job poet ranges far and wide through unexpected semantic fields for the sources of his similes, metaphors, drawing on weaving, agronomy, which would be farming, labor practices, meteorology, different crafts, even the preparation of foods. So it's like he uses so many things to make his poetry. The third and ultimately decisive level of poetry in the book is when God addresses Job out of the whirlwind. So let me repeat this for you. Elihu is like a kindergarten, his poetic abilities. The three friends, he says, are above the Psalms. Job is above the three friends, and when God speaks, he blows them all out of the water. And that alone just makes the hair stand on my neck, on the back of my neck. It's like, wow. Because that just like confirms for me, it confirms the inspiration of the book and just adds to the interest. The wide-ranging panorama of creation in the voice from the whirlwind shows a sublimity of expression, a plasticity of description, an ability to evoke the complex and dynamic interplay of beauty and violence in the natural world, and even an originality of metaphoric inventiveness that surpasses all the poetry, great as it is, that Job has spoken. Okay, so I found that of interest. When did Job live? I don't want to take much time. I'll give you the range. The latest it is written, nobody says it was written after 539 BC, before Christ. Okay, so it goes at least that far. Most people would put it around Abraham's time, which is like 2000 before Christ. Okay. Personally, I am going to put it at Abraham's grandchildren. So that would be like Jacob's time, something like that. Why the dating? One is the description of all of his camels and the time. It just sounds like the time of the patriarchs. Okay. The land of Uz, I also mentioned, we don't know exactly where it is, but it's east of the Jordan. There's no mention of the Mosaical law. There's no mention of any Israelite religious practices. There's just nothing. Theological themes, suffering, righteousness, justice, but there's nothing to make us. Those problems have been around since Adam, so it's like you can't date it on that one. There are a few archaeological things, but not so much. So 2000 to 1500 before Christ is where I would place it, but it's a guess. Let's talk for a moment about the priesthood of Melchizedek. Because I put Job in the priesthood of Melchizedek. Not meaning he's number 2, but meaning he's in the same category. Because Melchizedek is exactly in Abraham's time, so it's the time of the patriarchs. And Abraham goes and rescues Lot, as if you remember the story, and he comes back with all this loot from rescuing Lot. And then he comes back to Sodom and Gomorrah, and all of a sudden Melchizedek shows up as this priest that knows God. And Abraham goes out, and Melchizedek brings him, what was it, bread and wine? Yeah, I'm not sure. And so, but anyway, he gives Melchizedek 10% of the loot. And later in Hebrews, the God explains, well, Melchizedek is greater than the Levitical priesthood. And this was proved because Abraham gave him 10%. All I want to show you is God is perfectly happy to have a priest outside of the Jewish family. Yeah. And so I believe you can put Job just in the same category. He's just like, well, we don't know where he comes from, but it's obvious he's perfectly acceptable to God, right? Job is mentioned elsewhere in the Bible. And in Ezekiel, in 2 verses, it says, Job, Noah, and Daniel were the most righteous men that ever lived on the earth. Okay? Noah, Daniel, and Job. So this is God's perception, right? And it's not a perception, it's God's reality. He's just telling us how it is. So please, when we're looking at Job, don't think, oh, he was just stuck up or whatever. No, this guy was very, 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 very pleasing to God, right?